2012 Nissan Rogue driver's side front inner CV boot replacement. First thing you want to do is take off the front wheel. That DeWalt is now broken. It's not a very good tool. I mean, it works great, but it's not reliable. Works great when it works. Alright, the next thing you want to do is take off that cover. Get your push pin pliers out, take that cover off. And you gotta have a set of push pin pliers. Those things are awesome. So get yourself a set of those. Alright, take that cover off. And as you can see right there, it's, puking grease all over the place. So we're gonna go ahead and take that apart and put a repair kit on there. A real repair kit. Undo the brake retaining clips, the brake line retaining clips, or brake hose retaining clips. They just slide out with a screwdriver. 21mm, you're gonna undo the knuckle from the strut. You're gonna need two 21mm. You're gonna need a wrench and you're gonna need a 21mm socket. Alright, go ahead and take those bolts that hold the knuckle to the strut out. There's two of them. Both sides are 21mm. You can use a wrench in the socket or two wrenches. However you want to do it, just, take them out. You may have to use a little bit of force because they do get stuck in there sometimes. There's a little bit of tension on there from the weight of the knuckle. Loosen up that cotter pin. Take that cotter pin out the end of the axle, and then take off that locking nut thingy, that locking washer at the tip. Use a pry bar, screwdriver, whatever. Just get it off. And that nut behind there is a 32mm. So you're going to need a 32mm socket on an impact wrench. You can do that as your first step while you have the vehicle on the ground. Or stick a screwdriver in the side of the rotor into the slot of the rotor, and you can break it free that way as well if you don't have an impact tool. It may require an air hammer to push that axle through the knuckle. A lot of times they do not push through that easily. But whatever you do when you use an air hammer, just don't mess up the threads on the end of that knuckle. There is a divot in the middle, a concave area, where you can fit something pointy directly in the center of that axle to aid you in pushing it through without destroying the threads on that axle. So whatever you do, just don't destroy the threads on the tip of that axle. And don't destroy your nut either. Don't put your nut on there and beat the end of the nut. Just find something sharp, put it in the center of that axle, and then push it through that way. Hammer it through that way. Best way is with an air hammer. So what you're going to want to do is take that axle all the way out of the knuckle. Make sure you do not stretch your ABS wire like I just did there. Make sure you don't mess that up. Alright, get your brake hose out of the way, slide it onto the other side, and make sure that when that knuckle is fully extended that you don't have too much tension on the brake hose or the ABS wires. And there's the part number for the axle repair kit, or the CV boot repair kit. And you may want to put something underneath the axle on that subframe right there to catch the grease that's going to spill out. Now that is the clamp that you're going to have to undo. It's just two little tabs. That's the first tab, and then there's another tab closer to you that you'll have to remove. I'm going to zoom in on that as well. But just like I was saying, make sure that you have something underneath that axle because there will be some grease that's going to spill out. And it's already a mess there. You see, that's how you do the clamp. It's like a flip over type clamp. You can see it right there a little better in the close-up picture. See, both tabs are out and the ears are flipped up on it. So yeah, like I was saying, just make sure you have something underneath the axle to catch the grease that's going to spill out. See, there's a lot of grease still in there, and that's going to spill out and it'll get all over your driveway or wherever it is that you're working. So just make sure you put something there to catch the grease. Now inside there, what I'm doing with the pick is removing that little clip. You just pop that clip right out. It's pretty easy to pull out. You may want to support the end of the axle so that you can get the lower portion of that clip out. And just get that clip out of the way. The kit will come with a new clip as long as you get it from Nissan. I don't know about other aftermarket kits, but I know the Nissan kit The Nissan boot repair kit usually comes with that clip, comes with a new one. Make sure you clean it up as well as you can, especially the outer edge. You want to make sure that's pretty dry when you put it back together, so that you get a nice seal on your new boot. And it makes installation of the new clamp a lot easier when you don't have to fight, the boot sliding off because it's just so slippery from the grease. Alright, so take those 3 roller bearings off. They're gonna slide off. Some of them come off easily and some of them don't. So if yours doesn't come off of that triangular shaped 3-prong thingy, I don't know what that's called. If your roller bearings don't come off easily, don't fight it. Just leave them on there and just clean it up as best you can. You don't have to clean it up, but for the sake of me trying to be neat and not getting grease all over the place, I like to clean it up with the pig mat, and it just makes the job a lot easier putting it together without all of the grease in the way. Get you some snap ring pliers. I believe those are the wrong size right there, but it still works. You can use something that's a little smaller than what you're supposed to use. It's just going to be a little bit more difficult. But try and get the correct size snap ring pliers and put your hand in front of the snap ring, just in case it does decide to slip out of the pliers. It won't go flying and hit you in the eye or somebody else in the eye, unless you want to hit somebody else in the eye with the snap ring. But anyway, just put your hand there so that whenever it pops off, if it doesn't stay in the snap ring pliers, it won't hit anybody in the face, and you won't lose your snap ring. Even though the new kit should come with a new snap ring, and it usually does, but just in case something goes wrong, you may lose it or whatever, you'll have a backup snap ring just in case. Now that's the correct size snap ring pliers, so you'll see it comes off pretty much on the first try with the correct size. However, it still went flying. Now that 3-prong thing at the end of the axle shaft will just slide right off. Most of the time they'll slide right off. Sometimes you may have to tap it lightly with a rubber hammer. You can even use a regular hammer to tap it, because it doesn't take that much effort to pull that thing off of the end of the axle. That's your grease. That's your new grease. You can just squeeze that right in. You'll see how it's done later on. You don't need to use the entire bottle either. That's your new clamp. That's the new bigger clamp, obviously, and that's the new small clamp right there. That's the new snap ring that keeps the roller bearings inside the cup, or whatever you call it. I don't know what you call it, but you saw it earlier in the video. That's the new snap ring. And the other clip on the right, that's for the end of the axle, but we didn't take the axle all the way out, so we don't need to use that one. I usually don't take the axle out because it's just not necessary. I usually just take it apart right there. You have plenty of room to take it apart right there, and then just slide it out and do what you need with the rest of the axle on a bench, as you see right there. So clean it up as best you can. You don't have to clean it up, but I like to be as neat as I can when I'm doing this type of work. So cleaned it up, and then you're gonna undo that clamp right there. It's a little out of focus, so I'm sorry for that shot right there, but it's not too bad. You can still understand what's going on. Then you just slide everything off, clean that shaft up. You gotta rub the shaft down, make sure it's nice and clean. No grease on the shaft. Alright, so next thing you want to do is put your small clamp on. Then you slide the boot down there, slide it down as far as you can get it, just to get it out of your way. And it's got to fit into that groove at the end of the axle anyway. Make sure that when you put that clamp, make sure that when you tighten that little clamp down, that inner section, the smaller section of that axle boot is seated inside that little groove. There's a groove that rests in. Now you see how it has that flat area right there at the end of the spline right there? That's the wrong way. That goes on first. So just flip that over. If you see that section right there, that's wrong. That's not fully seated right there. You can see it doesn't go all the way down. Don't hammer it down because it won't go all the way down. So just flip it over. It should slide on pretty easily. You may have to tap it on a little bit with a rubber hammer, or just don't hit it too hard with a regular hammer. But that should slide right on. Most of the ones, actually all of the ones that I've done, they just slide right on. Just make sure that you can fit your circlip in there. So snap ring. Make sure it fits in the groove, and then you put it on. Make sure it's fully seated in the groove after you have it put onto the end of the axle. Always make sure that clip is fully seated. Or snap ring. Alright, so don't forget the big clamp. You gotta put that big clamp over there. I usually put the big clamp on the cup section of the axle, but that works too. As long as you can get it in, just whatever you do, don't forget it, because you don't want to have to take it apart again. And oh, also don't forget that clip. You'll see me. Yeah, actually, I already put the clip in there. You see the clip sitting right there? Yeah. So just make sure you don't forget that clip, that retaining clip, as well. And this is the way I usually do it. I usually put those roller bearings in at the last minute because they slide off pretty easily, and you just don't want to drop them on the floor. Put the top two facing up so that gravity keeps them in place, and then you just hold the lower one by hand and slide it in, just the way you see me do it right there in the video. Now what I did that you can't see on the camera is support the end of the axle so that the axle is almost straight with the cup, and this helps you put that clip in a lot easier, and it just makes putting the boot on a lot easier as well. So try and support the end of the axle. What I usually do is just take a bungee cord and tie one end to the strut, tie the other end around the axle, and then just keep it, try and keep it parallel with the cup. Just kind of try and keep it in a straight line with the cup so that the axle is not bent downward. It's just going straight in, and it just makes this so much easier. So put the clip in. If you took the clip out, you should be able to figure out exactly how to put it in, because it's pretty straightforward, and once you got it apart, it becomes pretty obvious. But we're going to show some close-up shots of the groove that the clip sits in, and that clip does have to sit in that groove. So make sure that it is fully seated in the grooves. There's 3 grooves that clip needs to be fully seated into. Hopefully that's clear enough for you to see, exactly how it rests inside that groove, and, the way it's supposed to be. And you can see down at the bottom there's the lower groove, one of the other grooves. Now this axle boot, you see that concave area that I just pointed out in the video? It has to go with that the convex area on the inside of that boot. So make sure that lines up. That has to fit in there. Fits in there like a puzzle piece. It goes in there perfectly. Make sure that is perfectly lined up, and then you can go ahead and just slide your new CV boot right on top of that. Put your clamp on and tighten up the clamp. But first, you want to put the grease in. So what I usually do is push the axle in as far as I can, and then slide the boot back. You can see me pushing the axle forward so that I'll have room to fit the grease behind it. So push the axle forward, and then you take your grease, or you want to push the boot down a little bit, squeeze that grease in there. You want to squeeze about 75% of that container into the axle cup, but you don't have to put the entire container in there. Just 75% of it is good, most of it. And then you can squeeze a little bit into the boot as well, if you can't get it all behind that cup. Sometimes it's a little bit difficult to get all of that grease in there without getting the grease all over the place. Alright, so after you've done that, you're going to want to put your boot around. You're going to want to put your boot on. Trying to get as much grease in there as possible. You see I did get a little bit of grease on the outside of it, but that's alright, we can clean that up later. Alright, so make sure that that surface where the clamp goes onto is pretty clean, because you don't want that to slide off. And make sure that you have the convex areas and the concave areas lined up together. Make sure that everything is lined up perfectly, and the end of that axle boot is inside the groove as well. It also fits inside of a groove, so just make sure that that's seated inside that groove properly. Now when you're putting this clamp on, you're going to want to make sure that the clamp is on the smooth section of the axle. You don't want to put it on that section where you have that little rubber convex area. You want to put it on the axle. You want to make sure it's clamping right on that area as you see there. You want to put it in the middle. And to put it back together, you just pretty much reverse the process. Make sure that you have your ABS wire routed the correct way. Make sure that your brake line is routed the correct way. And you put your knuckle bolts in. The knuckle to strut bolts, just put those in, tighten them up. Make sure you're putting a little bit of forward pressure on the knuckle, so that it's in like a negative camber position versus a positive camber position. And this way your alignment will pretty much be spot on. Well, not spot on, but it'll be pretty much the same way it was when you took it apart. Most of the time they're in a negative camber position where it's, you have some force pushing it back, because there's a little bit of play there. Just pay attention to me right here. What I'm going to do is push forward on the top of the rotor and tighten the strut bolts up at the same time, and you'll see the movement. It's in high speed, but you'll still be able to see what I'm doing, and that will be in the negative camber position. You'll be putting some negative camber into that. See what I'm doing? Pushing forward and tightening at the same time. You only have to do the pushing forward part on one of the bolts. Once you've got one of them tight, it'll hold it in place, so you don't have to do any more pushing forward on the top of the rotor. And that's pretty much it. Yeah, we're done here, so I'm just cleaning it up, and we want to put the wheel back on, and then that's it. You can drive the car out and enjoy the rest of your day. Well, you gotta put that cover back on too, so don't forget that inner fender cover right there, and make sure you put the clips in there, and put your wheel on, tighten it up, torque it down properly. Don't use an impact gun directly on your lug nuts unless you have a torque stick. You can use a torque stick, that'll help out a lot. But don't use just a socket on an impact gun to tighten up your lug nuts. You're asking for problems later on. So, and make sure that the backing plate does not rub on the rotor. These are notorious for that because the backing plate is so close to the rotor, and if you just touch it the wrong way, it'll rub against the rotor. And that's what you see me doing right there in the video, is just making sure that the backing plate is not rubbing up against the back of the rotor. Tighten it up, and then spin the wheel again just to make sure that backing plate isn't rubbing against the rotor, because if it is, you're going to have to jack the car back up again, move the backing plate, and that could be a pain in the butt. But anyway, thanks for watching Auto Fix Pal. Make sure you subscribe, like, and comment. If you liked the video, click the thumbs up thing. If you don't like it, click the thumbs down. It doesn't matter either way. Appreciate you watching. Leave your comments down below. Links are in the description. And Auto Fix Pal, I'm out.